Yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'd love to hear about your first trail running story or what tour training, what you're training
What tour
for.
training for? Dus kat betuka.
Oh dear.
We're the Muppets over here.
I thought it'd be more professional after 3 days. Oh, dear.
Welcome to the Muppets Endless
Ah,
Training.
all right.
You know.
It's all good. Fun and games. Well, welcome back to Endless Trails. It's Michael, and you're with Josh once again. And this week we're talking about training styles. So, Josh, how did you first start training?
So yeah, no history of
Mm.
any real run training until starting the outdoor fitness. So I guess it was a beginning of just the regular classes of doing run classes, which really started to lock me into a regimen, I guess, where it was doing a lot of interval training. So I'd do sort of 2 interval sessions a week and then do a basic run session, which I didn't really rate that. But it wasn't until specific, the good old upsell of the run program, which is a program basically that's set out specifically targeted to either your half marathon or your 10K or your marathon. And certainly my first intro into that was half marathon training, and that was really structured around 3 runs a week. With an interval session, tempo session, and then your long run on the weekend, and then slowly building that with the good old 10% rule or whatever the
Yeah.
methodology was at the time, and really gearing that towards like a timeline of. It's a good question. Do you recall how long the timeline was? I don't recall what the actual structure was. It 10 weeks? It was longer,
Yeah,
I'm
it
sure.
depends what the intro was. So I think in the context of this was the Savvy Run program training block and was normally driven towards an event.
Yes.
So working backwards from that, including the taper period, I think if you were doing the marathon, it would have been approximately 16 weeks. And then they started around February with about a 4-week load. So if you weren't running prior to that or over the summer sort of period of keeping a base, you could probably start those sort of first 4 weeks got you back into running. And if it was a half or 10 or 5, it was about a 12-week program. And I think the marathon was about 16 weeks, taking you from February, March, and then 10 city building up into June.
And you jumped straight in on the marathon, didn't you? You didn't do the half first.
Yeah, from a training perspective with Savvy, so I did a half marathon myself. So I came off the Achilles injury and I was just running and on the treadmill, and then just at that stage threw myself into a half marathon. But when I decided to do a marathon, I ran into Ange Sav, and then she introduced to me the run program that they were about to do for Gold Coast, and that was my first exposure to any form of structured plan. I hadn't looked it up prior to that, so it was just like, oh, there's a running community, jump in.
So prior to that, going into the first half that you did, it was just, oh, I'll run and I guess I'll do 21Ks eventually, or like,
Yeah, that was right. Just doing some regular runs, and it was just running during the week. There was no real structure to that. It was just go to the gym 3 times a week as a rough number, and then there's an event on, so I'm just going to go do that. And probably prior to that, I'd run maybe say 15Ks or something like that. So there was no exposure to a plan.
that's pretty
No,
impressive.
no Googling, no looking on the internet. It was just, let's go do this. There's a sign up, go for it. There might have been an email that you get from back in those days, a little cheat sheet or something like that, not in a set structure to follow.
And that's what I mean. Like that's pretty impressive because there wasn't that saturation of social media and runfluencers and influencers and everyone to do that. And you
Yeah,
just sort of went, oh, I'll give this a crack, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll run a few times a week and then go and do a half.
blind faith, as we would say in that scenario. So in your context of looking at jumping into a run program with a structure, so I think you sort of explained that there was normally a speed set, a tempo set, a long run, and that could be 3 or 4. There'd be any other elements. I mean, that's running. Was there any other form of activity or strength work or things like that involved with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, which is like you've just sort of alluded to, getting into the gym with the Savvy program, because I was already doing the outdoor fitness and I was already in that space. I've already built this regimen or this regime of doing X amount of classes per week. And like I've said previously, I'd get to as many as I could.
Yeah.
But yeah, locked into the three runs a week, and then aiming to do a minimum of or aiming to do 2 strength sessions a week as well, which were run specific strength work.
That's right. So Savvy would target their midweek training block, and we're encouraging you to engage in those activities. And then something that was probably a non-load impacting, so whether or not that was a spin class or something similar to that. So you still had some activity through your legs, but not actually the load through running.
And then heavily encourage also to do their deloading or stretch-based sort of yoga classes,
that's right,
as well as a recovery.
Yeah.
But I think the minimum was aiming for those 3 runs a week and 1 to 2 strength sessions a week. So yeah.
If you look at those different types of sessions, if you broke down each one of those, what would you sort of see a typical build over sort of 12 weeks? So probably initially with some speed work, but then what would the tempo weeks and the long run weeks sort of look like in that build?
Oh yeah,
if you remember Savvy's version.
Trying to remember back, because I like, prior to jumping onto the run program, I went hard in on the interval sessions. I'd do 2 interval sessions a week. Just I don't know, I found a groove and really loved it. Like I'd do, I believe it was a speed set on a Tuesday morning and then a speed set on a Wednesday evening as well. And that worked well for my body. And then jumping into the run program, it was like, well, let's pull back on that and just follow the program as is. And so you'd start out with shorter interval sessions. You might start, really, the memory's struggling here. And I wish I still had the book. I had it for a long while.
So importantly, one of the things that they had was they would send out an email on a weekly basis.
Yes.
And then also they would have a run program book. So a lot of the Savvy OGs would have their marathon training or half marathon, 10, etc. Books that would all be filled out down to nutrition, how you're feeling. So that sort of set some discipline around following not just a weekly guide of running, but also feedback loop on how your activity and response was going in recovery
and
as well.
And that's the good thing with that. Whilst I don't view that program as what we now know as coaching, it's a very different sort of thing. It's a little bit homogenized in terms of here's the program and everyone does the same thing.
Yeah, so I would say self-engaging, and what you put into it is what you get out of it.
Absolutely.
So in a run club style approach to training, which is what we probably went through in 2014, 15, 16 onwards sort of period of time, that was a cluster of runners in a session. There might have been 10 to 30 runners in those speed sets, interval sets, and then they'll be on different days, so there'd be different dynamics of people, or friend groups that you're running with, or different pace groups as well. But then the common run would be the long run on the Saturday. So the speed session would build over sets of 100s, 500s, whatever they are, recoveries. The tempo would be a growing tempo, so sometimes you'd have your warm up and the tempo mid-session would get longer as you build. And then I think the long run would be a build in a cycle of typically like a 3-week build, a 4th evening plateau, and then another build of 3, and then going again until you got up to your close to race long run efforts out there as well.
Exactly. And I remember more so once I moved to the marathon project, because I did the half, I think I did the half program once, and then I did the marathon project at least once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was that build and aiming for a minimum of a 30K long run,
Yeah.
building for the marathon.
Yeah.
Of course, with the half, I think it might have been about 16, plateaued out at about 16Ks. And early on, I recall there was a discussion, and I had no idea, and that's what I thought was a little bit wild at the time, because those wraparound services were really kind of cool. We'd have meetings to get to, or meetings, that's the wrong way to put it, but get the whole crew who was doing the different levels of the run program.
The different pacing sort of groups as well would sort of get together and
discuss the program and discuss what you're doing and discuss and talk about mindset, and then there'd be sort of little workshops around foam rolling or nutrition or those sort of things. So I think those sort of things and the booklet were really good in that homogenized way where it's not super targeted to you, but you had that accountability. So you'd sort of write down what distance you did, what your pace was like, and how that consistency was built. So you could build a bit of a picture, and then you could use that booklet to look back on.
Yeah.
So that logbooking piece was really good. Yeah. And a good. Like I said, for someone who had no idea, to be able to set that practice and get that established from going zero to, now I have an idea, and you'll have something to look back on as well.
So that format worked really well for a range of runners. So that program sort of went from 5K, 10K, half marathon up to marathon, and a lot of runners would flow through those ranges over the years. So the basis of that was quite good. Similar, if you were looking for, even the high intensity part of that still existed, that if you really wanted to push your time, there was quite a few people that would still get in that sub-3 sort of window following that program, and maybe they may add a fourth day to their running or some other performance components to that as well. Over the years as that sort of progressed, and we talked in the first episode how we also went from marathon training into different events and different items that are out there. How did you see your training block change? Did that sort of stay around a logbook style, or did you look at coaching? As you sort of started to explore those other activities, what did you look to engage upon?
So after that, and I think that's what is really important, and what I really look back on is that whole outdoor fitness, the classes, the regimental sort of stuff, and the log booking really set a good practice and a good way of being. For me to then, being a bit of a researcher, I was able to then take from that and go, okay, once I sort of found, there's this bigger stuff that can happen, there's this trail stuff that can happen, what does that look like? So I'd research that, and I'd go to the library and get books out from the library. Once I was sort of a bit more into the internet, have a little bit of a look around at what information is out there. And I remember one of the first big things that did change for me is I found an ultra specific program, which was, like we've discussed, the HANI program.
Yep. And
I took that, but tweaked it using the practice that I'd had with Savvy. So that Find Your Feet program was like the Savvy program talked about time on feet.
Yeah.
And it's built back from an event. So that program was geared towards UTA.
Correct. Yeah.
And so, instead of just, because it was mostly time on feet, there wasn't a lot of detail in doing tempo and interval sort of stuff.
How to tackle the midweek runs, but it still gave you different phases. So I think if there was the 22, 50, 100 program from memory, and then if you worked backwards, as you're saying, Josh, is that they would have phases which were like hill work, so strength work, and then it became whether it was endurance work, and then it became like trail specific work. So each 4 weeks was sort of very specific to a phase of building that was targeted towards. So I think it was just the PDF, but there was also a handbook guide that was with it as well. And if you went through that, you could actually understand how the program was structured, and there was think every 6 weeks, a mission
Yes.
run that was designed around that, and you could look at the loading that was designed around that to be able to do the mission and then sort of recover and then build back up again through that.
And that's one thing I recall about the Savvy program too, was the interval programming was on a 3-week rotation where we do hills,
Yep.
sand,
Yes.
and flats.
Yeah.
And so I sort of continued that and
Okay.
carried that over and inserted that sort of stuff into the Find Your Feet program as
Yep.
well. So I maintained some more like working on the sand to get the different stimulus, making sure I was doing the hills, but changing it out where so if I sort of saw that there wasn't any specific targeted speed work in that program, I'd sub it in using a sort of hybrid version between the two.
Yeah. Again, it was that logbook accountability that you could print it out, you could write on it, you could tick off. So was that your style of your own accountability? Like, so we have these programs and we look at them and, you know, they have evolutions as we sort of go through in our own evolution of using these things. So was that your approach of, I have a list, I'm just going to tick these, or did you log the hours? What was your approach to that?
Yeah, so I'd definitely, aim to hit those runs. Sometimes with life, it gets crazy. Again, the great thing about Savvy was at the time they had different times where you could do this. Like I said, you could do the intervals on the Tuesday morning or the Wednesday evening. So I began by sort of ticking it off, but I'd put the distance because it was, a time-based program, a time on feet, as was the Savvy. I'd sort of go, okay, this, it calls for an hour long run, and then I'd put down what distance I sort of got, just to keep that sort of accountable, and then sort of your average pace as well, and sort of continue through that. How did you go with that log booking? Did you maintain that after the Savvy sort of program?
I probably had that program for multiple years. I think potentially 4, 5, 6 years I would have the program before I went into a bit of hybrid running between doing ultras and marathons, and then it was really just jumping in and using the long runs as being a guide. But the logbook process to that, definitely, I've got my first couple of years of those sitting around in the cupboard that they come out once in a while and you have a look and go, yep, filled all those out and tick those, like you're saying about logging the time and the kilometers, and also the feedback of how you're feeling and the other activities that you're actually doing, and then seeing the success of that, so you could go see what your result was. And I sort of wrote that on the front of the book as a bit of a feedback. And I think there was some journaling items, things like that were also in the book as well. And when that changed, I think sort of like you're sort of saying, with a Find Your Feet was, so the first 50 that I did was straight off that program as well. So it was again filled out and just using that as being a guide. And I think Hanny had 3 versions, I think, of that guide, which was like a beginner, advanced, and intermediate. There was like thresholds to target for, so you had a bit of an idea of where am I in this to know whether or not I'm doing a 2 or 3 hour sort of long run. But I definitely logbooked that first year in the 50 kilometre race at UTA. The next year for the 100, I did the same. And then I was trying to blend that. So that was a bit of a tricky period of time of doing 3 marathons a year, and then also trying to fit in a 50 and 100. But my discipline did go to the 50 and 100 as the focus, and then really just recovered to go back into the marathon side of things. So I was very fortunate to be able to jump back into the program with Savvy with maybe 6-7 weeks between the next marathon, and I would sort of just pick up where that was at that period of time and jump into the long run and try to transition from the trails back into road at that period.
Great. And So it sort of went Savvy Run program into almost a self-guided online programming, like
Very similar, the same style between the two.
yes,
Because
but there's because it's not aligned with the company or an on the ground company.
yes,
Their sort of method because it was a free program, which was great.
yeah.
Um, and that sort of fed into like as I guess a marketing piece for
Yeah.
their shop and
The
their
discipline,
other
but
things.
as you know, Josh, came out of doing that logbooking initially.
Yes.
So the ability, if you picked up that program by itself and tried to do it off a PDF guide without having the I suppose the discipline to execute on those items, it would be a lot harder, especially when you're doing something bigger. So having that discipline to know that's what I need to do, but you still had to go out and do your own runs and explore and find the trails all at the same time. And I think that's part of that engagement early we've been talking about, is that you're trying to do 2, 3, 4 new things all together at the same time, being find the trails, find the type of trails that you're doing, running on trails that you haven't done previously, and at the same time train for an event that you haven't done. Whereas obviously running a marathon or a half, some of those things aren't all happening at the same time. Running on concrete is running on the road or concrete. That bit doesn't change for you. If we sort of flip that, because that's been sort of our journey probably 10 years ago. At any stage during that, obviously we've talked about structured plans, logbook style. Did you look at other alternative ways of doing training, whether or not that's been one-on-one coaching, online coaching? Were they things that were around at that early stage?
So I guess this is where we start to divert. Like I think some of our journey is runs super in tandem, but it does this sort of in and out sort of program where we divert a little. So I really, when I found trail and ultra, I took off in a completely different direction. Start, like I said, research, pulled different things from different books and different programs, and looking stuff, and really started using that early methodology to train myself and really start guiding and changing the program. So it started off with the Savvy program, leading to Gold Coast Marathon, then the Hanny program leading to UTA, and then I started developing my own program, going, okay, well, I've got this, I can just download that, change a bunch of stuff, change the dates, and move things around, and that's where I started to really play and experiment and just coach myself, I guess. Yeah. I've got the theory, I know about the strength work because I was doing 2, 3 strength sessions a week. I was doing boxing training, I was doing intervals, I was all this yoga, everything. And then once I sort of pulled away from Savvy, I started to I maintained that, got a gym set up at home and just sort of did my own thing. But you sort of went a slightly different route.
Yeah, for a period of time there, I was doing a bit of everything. I think I was maintaining my connectivity as part of the running sort of Savvy community and the friendship group that I had there. We had a number of Savvy runners sort of jump in a bit of trails. So
you're a real leader in that space, like jumping in the Savvy Runner a Facebook group.
Posting
things, messenger group,
where we're going, what we're doing, and people wanted to come explore or do something, and I was this is what I'm doing, and if you want to, and people interested in doing that, and it was obviously a bunch of people sort of followed along and got into doing UTA events and other races around locally as well.
Quite pivotal in, I think, introducing a whole cohort of people into trail and ultra running. Which is my opinion.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
Whether or not it's part of your enjoyment. Like I like to go out running with other people and go explore. That's part of your enjoyment and sharing that those life experiences with multiple people. I think early that 50 and 100 very similar, had Hanny's program, had Savvy happening at the same stage, and that's sort of where I got exposed into some of the UTA on course training days, and I went to one of those that was being run and got introduced to Andrew Lennon, who had run strength coaching club out of the Sutherland area. But I went on, explored. We did a 20, 30K run through Katoomba and covered a number of other trail items about packing your backpack, poles, nutrition, trail shoes, a bunch of different items. And I was like, oh great, there's a massive source of information, because the next time you want to go back and I suppose do better from my perspective, and realised where my weaknesses, I suppose, were, because I did that first one, and then you realise, geez, I need to do a lot more work in I suppose, strength work and running. So I did jump on to do some coaching with him on online coaching, and did that for a number of years, and that would cover also my marathon running. So it was covering the multiple different types of events that I was doing, and then I'd go do my midweek runs back with Savvy and sort of do a bit of a hybrid, look at what I needed to do, which might have been 10Ks, and it was hills and they're on the flats, so I might just do repeats over cliff road or a hill set just to get that run in. So that sort of created a bit of a tussle between the two of how do you maintain both at the same time. But I would go get my long runs. So if that involved doing some trails, sometimes jumping it back onto the road to do some Ks during the day. If it's a really big day, that's one way of getting the big long runs in. It was a bit of a distraction for 20Ks during the middle of the Saturday, and then I'd head back up the trails, up the mountain to get some vert in. So that was the hybrid between having some accountability of face-to-face running community connectivity, and then going out and following a online coaching guide. And I probably did that for, it feels like about 3-4 years at that stage. When you started to adapt your own personal program, what happened when you go back if through success, failures? How did you adapt the evolution of that? So you might have a great year running, go back, do you just rinse and repeat the same program again?
So definitely there's an evolution of that, and probably not necessarily a good evolution. So I think I started really strong in that space because I was doing a lot of strength work, a lot of cross training, had my 3 runs a week, and then when I sort of came on board with the ultra and moved away from the outdoor fitness, I maintained a lot of it for a while, but then once I sort of leaned more heavy into the running, I started playing with higher volume running, so more distance, more time on feet, more runs per week, starting from 3 runs a week into 4, 5, or even double run days. So I played around a lot with that, and which the strength side of things and the cross training side of things, there's only so much time in the week when you're working and family and everything. So I think I leaned more into overall volume running, and some of the strength fell apart. And so with that, then that sort of led to some maintenance with going and seeing some not PTs, good old Bainesy at Bain Med.
Physio,
physio.
Don't know if it's maintenance. It might be called repair.
repair. That's it. And then getting some sort of like, strength work programming through that, like they'd give you recommended exercises.
Was that due to, with the triggers of that, obviously you've added load, or was it just because you're doing load and more, sort of two different things, because you can do more races, which naturally comes with load, but then there's actually very clearly more load, which is your weekly mileage goes from 30 to 50 if you're doing a marathon, to 50 to potentially say 70 if you're going to London, even more, if that just doubles.
Yes.
Is that the style of impact?
No, I was always really hyper aware of and that education piece that happened early on, which again, super thankful of that foundation. So doing sort of the 3-week cycle of build, drop it back a little bit, build, drop it back a little bit. So I was always pretty sensible, and the old 10% rule, and which is arguable at this stage, but as a guide, like that kind of works. I think my sort of stuff might have fallen apart a little bit is where I started to lean, fall away from doing the yoga bits and the strength.
The mobility and strength work around that at the same time, which I think we all go through. I had that window where I just wasn't doing it, and I didn't do it for a very long time, and still had obviously lots of body, upkeep items to manage, and I suppose that's part of volume and aging and all those things that sort of occur, and you have run-specific injuries that can happen from running harder, or again, changing the type of running, being vert, uphills, downhill type of work. They all can manifest problems just in themselves.
Which is the beauty of the community piece, right? And whilst a lot of it is geared around a business making money from you to by coming to classes, but there's different ways to do that. You've got your run clubs and everything, but if you've got that accountability of I have to go to this class because I'm paying for it, and also you've got this community there where you're building these friendships and you're all going there to do a long run, to do your strength work. Like there's that great thing. When you sort of move away from that, the accountability's on you. Nobody's going to be there to go, or there's no money coming out of your account to go.
And I think that's where both of our styles still do that change, whereas I found it really hard to put that work in. Unless I had an accountability for that, but the classes, I suppose I struggled maybe whether it was the timing and being outdoors and those types of things around the strength sort of classes. And then I know they did an indoor session, and there was some Baymed performance workshops that they did as well, and they were like, that really sort of works. But I didn't really find the engagement of that until later, where we're probably through the same scenario of a few race events where you're going okay, you're going well, and I think what really changed my mind about that was when I wanted to go to that next level of going even further. That's probably the mindset said, to be able to do this, I need to take this sort of serious, and that changed my path. Did you find at any stage yourself that when you were engaged in Baymed physio style work and you got back onto doing the work, have you stayed in that pattern, or did you... How does this flow?
Flow is a great word, because that's definitely what I do. I think like I said, I probably experiment quite a lot. What last year or the year before that, I was pretty much high volume running every day. And maybe, I'd have a day off, once a fortnight, once every month maybe, from running, and then having to be really mindful of the accountability of getting some of the strength work in. But then I'll change it again, and then I'll sort of go into sort of a hybrid volume, or do some more strength work. Or
what do you see the trigger? Like, is there anything that you feel that changes between those mindsets, or is it just because of the type of race events that are coming up, or what's happening in life? Like,
I think the life piece is huge. Certainly my methodology, I target a race or an event, and then I'll, from the early days, build it back and go, here's the plan, and I'll spend a bit of time sitting on the computer, design it right, I'll put this in, these are the intervals I want to do, these are the speed sessions, tempo sessions, and then, specifically targeting some core work, strength work, and, really maintain that practice.
So you would highlight that in looking at your program coming back in mileage, you'd go, look, it's there in front of you. I've committed to something, and now work backwards to go, look, I know my run volume that I need to do, but you'd find, hey, wait a second, I need to really start to make sure that I tick some boxes on a weekly basis in these different areas to make sure that I'm building some strength foundation
Absolutely.
before getting to the peak load of the training blocks that are actually occurring.
Yeah, definitely. And so with that accountability piece, so my accountability is probably if I don't have an event to go to, then I struggle with that.
Yeah.
I'll sort of fall apart and I don't need to go, and because getting into the gym is like
the optional component versus the running
it's hard.
on the
mentally, mentally hard. So physically it's always hard, right?
Yeah.
But it's mentally hard. It's like, do I want to go and stand inside when I can just go up the mountain for a couple of hours? I know my choice.
Trail strength, right?
Yeah, even if it's raining, I'd rather be there than inside a gym.
And so I think what I'm sort of seeing is that in the down periods where there's no race events, the trail adventure component is done by just the running. Understand? Take the pressure off a little bit in regards to trying to do everything. But then when I lock into an event, and I think we've sort of talked about that, you're probably event choice picking of when you do things can be different. For example, you might not be doing, say, 3-4 ultras in a year where you're formally picking those items. You may choose 1 or 2 to target, and therefore your training block looks a little bit different during the year.
Yeah, definitely. And so I guess certainly more recently, I'll pick an event, and that'll be my goal for the year.
Yeah.
And then, as filler, I'll find something else to target.
Yeah.
So I think last year I did my event, and then just through the magic of social media, someone said something, and I went, oh, actually I could probably get elevation. So picked an elevation goal to keep me going through.
So a different personal challenge. So again, something to put on the calendar, and then work backwards to say, oh, okay, that's something I actually can do at the consequence of just my normal training volume. So
but as long as there's a goal, if there's a goal, and that could be an event, it could be a distance for the year, or an elevation for the year, or I think most recently I was sort of, okay, let's see if I can get this 5K time a little bit quicker.
So that would refine obviously your training approach during that period of time. So I think in my context, a comparison of that is where there's something always on in the calendar that been from back to back to back to back, feels like for a decade. Then just choosing how to transition between those events, but then that definitely highlighted that to be able to go to the bigger races and to be able to there was the 100 to the miler. It was I need to sort out my my strength work, and then I went searching for a personal trainer to focus myself around that. And again, I had that accountability. So for me, I had to go somewhere to do that. I've bought a gym set at home. I've had it there. It's sat outside. It hasn't been used maybe twice as an example. Whereas
it's hard. Like if you have to do it yourself, you don't have to answer to anyone. If you don't have anything to answer to, then why are you going to do it?
Yeah, and the balance. I think once I walk in through the door at home, the priorities change a little bit, and it's hard to then go do that. Even if it's to get up in the morning early and go do it, it's the last thing that you really want to do when you're recovering after big runs that are occurring. It took me quite a while. I remember I did Pilates for a while, and it was something similar, that it was early in the morning at 5:30, and I reckon I probably only went 50% of the time to it. It was just the wrong time slot and very hard mentally first thing in the morning to engage on that. I think similar, my training during the week for running shifted from the morning to the afternoon for just different, we've probably gone through different times of when you run, but that shifted as well to later in the day rather than first thing in the morning. But I found the PT locked in really well mid-afternoon, and I was able to do that. And then, very soon after that, as much as I did the miler, everything improved. As you'd probably imagine, those things do, but that was everything from, chasing a marathon PB time for 10 years. It was now I've got that time. I was able to go do a miler at the same time and do back-to-back events, but that was about just getting that schedule that worked well for me and able to get my runs in. So it was just a shift of approach, of really committing to a race, and that set the tone after that, and then it's just been a repeat process around that.
And how do you find, because I guess with my methodology where I am sort of event light, so I'll sort of peak and then it sort of comes down and there's might be something, a personal target or something. So there's a very clear peak and trough between years, whereas you're generally, like you say, 4 marathons a year, or 3 marathons a year plus 100, or how do you find managing that load? Because essentially you're always on then, to a degree. There's a lot of
there's no
balancing that downtime. Is there downtime?
Yeah, there tends to not be too much. Like I would be sometimes 300s in a year, and then marathons sitting around that as well. So I'd find the downtime was the 1 or 2 weeks after that major event, and then I'd be building again. And it's just been like that process. It's just become part of what I do. It has changed more recently due to different events and outcomes, but for the majority of the last 8 years, it has been back-to-back events of cramming everything in, and then having that feeling, if I really targeted an A race, maybe I could have got different results. But then I do these events and then remind myself that you have the opportunity to do this. Go do it, because you can save yourself for an A race and have like a performance perspective, not an adventure style race. But when it's a performance race, they don't all execute, and you can't PB every single marathon or race. Trials has probably set a bit of that shift in mindset, because not every trail race, even if it's the identical event, it's not the same. They've put down boardwalks, they've changed the trail, it's quicker or it's slower, there's rain, there's queues, all those things shift your time expectations. The marathon was the one where you could always go and try to chase that. So the more trails that I did, it sort of changed the discipline about trying to chase a marathon PB time, and it was more about just doing the event. Not being able to balance both at the same time. So I think that's definitely shifted over the years.
Yeah, because I've done UTA 50 at least 3 different courses on that.
Yeah.
So totally different, and you get your pinch points, you get different weather. There's a lot of different factors.
But
there.
I would mind myself doing those courses, and that's part of that training experience. They might be different and they feel different. But reminding yourself in the middle of that race what hurts is, I suppose, the key to take away for strength training. And that's what I would look at. I need to do more hills, or over the recent couple of years, I've noticed I've really sort of struggled with open fire trails and being able to run on once you've done all the single track and the vert and the climbing, and then I'd open up a fire trail ahead of me and I'd be like, this is the last thing that I want to do, and having to find a way to try to get moving and getting through that. And that's, okay, I need to work on that. So they're the type of things that you've had challenges with as well, and you've brought those back into your training sort of block and focus?
Oh, absolutely. My things certainly shifted over the years. From those early days, there was definitely that focus on the time, because road training, it's about the time, and then moving more into the destination and the fun. So I guess those early trail and ultra events was about, let's see. First of all, it was, I have no idea about this, but then it's like, okay, let's see if I can
then it gets competitive.
Get a bit quicker. And to the past few years, it's become more about, just be out there, being the one with having the most fun. Like, how do I?
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I love the journey. I love the destination. So, and that's in training and the event. So because it's a whole thing, you commit sometimes a whole year to an event, building up. So you've got to love the journey along the way.
Yeah.
And definitely but you've got to build yourself to that, because you spend a lot of money on these events, so you've got to build yourself into the best sort of version to ensure some kind of success.
Yeah.
And whether that's getting a time or a finish or whatever that looks like, definitely looking in. So one of my biggest weaknesses, and I still haven't unlocked it, is uphill. I love the downhill. I can get the flats, no worries, but the uphill will always pull me back. It's one of the funny things in any event. I'll charge past people going downhill, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And they'll say, "Don't worry, you'll see me on the hill back up." And sure enough, they'll pass me. So that's definitely something that I'll go hard in on in some training blocks to try and
so you know about it, so you know, and you do work towards it, but it's one of those things that sort of sits on you. Oh, gee, here we go again, and but it's how do you be successful in all those things? And sometimes it's like I just can't, but I can be really good at my nutrition and my mindset and my endurance, and maybe I'm not just that great at climbing hills. But if those other four things are really strong, which is not just running and strength, there's other components to that as well, that can make you still successful. You could spend a lot of time working up hills, but then you might not have the balance with those other things there as well. So
and that's definitely a trick. Like, that's probably quite specific to trail running and ultra running, is finding that balance of downhills, uphills, flats, technical trails, fire trails, like you say, wet trails, muddy stuff, because each of those can be its own piece of its own training focus.
Do you go targeting those things in your training block? Like I have different ways of approaching that, but do you find when you're looking at okay, this is my race that's coming up, how would you know I need to be looking at these types of things for that race that I'm doing in Fuji or Western States or a social run that we're making up ourselves, right? How do you approach knowing the components of that?
So definitely looking at the event that's coming up and having a bit of an understanding about what you're going to be. Is there going to be big slabs of road? Is it going to be really technical? Is there a lot of climbing? What does that climbing look like? What do some of the grades look like? I'm useless on really knowing 20%, 10%, all that sort of stuff, but having a bit of an idea about what that sort of, how much elevation is and what it looks like. So, UTA is a classic. There's a lot of stairs. Everyone knows there's a lot of stairs. So how do you go out and target those stairs? So locally, we'd go and hit Sublime, do Sublime repeats, or go to Kira and hit the stair section there and do repeats there.
It's interesting because even though that could be what the race we know it's about, it can also then be very different in the race. I think we'll talk about those things as we get into other episodes, because I think that's part of the real depth of those races, is that sometimes they get known for stairs.
Yes.
And then people get really focused on the stairs and then miss what potentially could be 70% of the race as well. And you start to drift off onto specific focuses and not ensuring that you've actually just got the volume of training sort of sitting in there as well.
And that's one of I think the first time I did UTA 50, post that, I must have sort of kind of nailed it to some degree, because post that, a lot of people were talking about the downhill and not being aware of that and how much that crushes the quads and being freaking out. So a lot of people, particularly with mountain events, ultra events, they'll focus on, we've got to get that elevation. How do we do the uphill,
elevation?
The run, but then forget about the downhill running. Me, that's probably not overly been a problem because I love the downhill running.
But that's a strength, right?
Absolutely.
That's there, whereas they may be the other way, as you were saying earlier, really good at climbing, but not as good as the downhill. And we all try to improve that one weakness area, but it doesn't have to become your master strength. It just needs to be better than what it is.
Absolutely.
Then in the day that evens out all those
And
types.
you don't want to go hard in on it
Yeah.
so that the rest suffers.
Yeah.
And again, this, going back to that training structure, that's why, like, to this day, I still make sure I do some form of speed training.
Yeah.
Semi-regularly, or certainly in a training block,
Yeah.
I'll make sure I throw in those intervals, try and do tempo sessions, because even though, if you're running 100 miles, 200 Ks, those sort of things, are you really going to be, charging out, doing a 4 minute or, sub 4 minute, 200, 400, 500 meters? Probably not. But keeping that balance as an overall piece, I sort of really try and
slices of the pizza, like the whole perspective of when you start to look back at then, I suppose you're building your own plans and you're comparing that data to previous. What other metrics are you using around that? So are you using your Strava data? I mean, now we're obviously evolved into having years of that data available. Are you using that data to then sort of build some, historic trending, or geez, I'm less than last year, or I'm in the right zone? How do you use that type of data?
So I'm certainly hybridized now. A lot of my training plans, so I'll print it, like design my training plan, very old school, and print it out on paper. Okay. And that keeps me accountable too. Yeah. So I'll print that, put it up on the kitchen cupboard. So every day I can cross it off. Like I'll cross it if I didn't do the session, or if it's a rest day, it's been crossed, or if it's a session that I do, I will write down the time. Like usually I'll have a time of what I'm aiming for. Hour and a half, for instance. I'll write the distance, I'll write the average pace per kilometre, even if it is trails. Then if I'm doing sort of interval sessions or mixed tempo session, I'll write the pace per segment. So if it's like 600 meters, I'll do, I did this. Not the pace so much, I'll put the pace per kilometre for that individual, even though it's not a kilometre, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then I'm using, so mostly, like at the moment I'm on Chorus. I was on Suunto. Early on I was on Garmin, but I haven't been on Garmin for since super early days with the watch that would get maybe one run in before you have to charge it every night. Then the Suunto app was really great, so I'd really go hard in on the Suunto app and really use extract as much data from that as I could. And now with Suunto, I'm looking at training load metrics and paying some attention to the long-term data, because they've got some pretty good stuff that has charts and where you sort of consider your training should be. I think take it with a grain of salt, but I definitely use that, particularly when I'm sort of not in a training block, so I can maintain some kind of I use the training load as a guide and go, oh, okay, cool.
You would have a top and bottom sort of guide, sort of sit between, and you sort of, okay, I'm in between that, and I'm either heading up a little bit, or it's okay, I'm comfortable with where I'm at the moment.
And then it automatically gets pushed to Strava, of course. Not a paid member of Strava, but using some of its PRs and segments to sort of go, oh, okay, cool. I can, I've done that better before, and look at the historical sort of, I've done this little segment before, or go out and do a 5K and there's, you get the little silver medal. Oh, I've done that quicker.
Surprisingly, sometimes when you don't think that you're actually going as well as you are, it sneaks in there.
Absolutely. And the really cool thing about some of that is, for instance, going and doing the Mount Kira loop, it's 5Ks, and there's about 2 or 3 different four different ways you can do it, I think. So you can start at the top or start at the bottom, clockwise, anti-clockwise. So there's sort of kind of 4 ways you can do that. So it's a good sort of metric. You go, okay, cool, I did that segment in.
So you have a benchmark. So what you're having is a bit of an indicator of a benchmark to be able to feel that, and probably, well, so the word's probably relative effort, right? Because you're sort of saying, well, gee, that was pretty hard today, but I actually did all right, or geez, okay, it was easy and I didn't go anywhere near I expected to. So, man, that's only a quick post-run snapshot normally to go, oh, that sort of validated how I felt in that run. So a bit of a reflection. If you're looking at, like say, year-to-year component, do you have, because your races may not all be around the same time, so I suppose that's part of the difference. Sometimes my use would be, I'm doing the same race around the same time of the years. If it's repeating, and you can sort of do a comparison back to the year before, and you can start to see your build, or volume build towards that race. Sometimes that will take a shift if you have an injury or something occurs. So if you've got those major things happening, how do you sort of take that into account when you're looking at your data comparison? How do you remember that last year I rolled my ankle and there was 3-4 weeks that are occurring?
So I'll definitely make notes of that on my hard copy.
Okay.
And so and because I've got that structure, and I'll throw in very similar workouts, I'll note my weekly kilometres,
Yep.
like what's my total volume,
Yep.
and some of the little niggles and issues.
Yep.
But one of the real ones I really like to look back on is if I do, say in an interval workout that's 400 metre sessions, and because I've broken that down into the 4 specific data points. Yep. Of I did this one at a 340 pace, or
Yep.
415 pace or whatever. I can go back, and so I do that workout again and go, oh, back here I was doing it quicker. Can I get this to that point again?
Yeah, and then be able to look around that. I suppose that's part of that understanding of looking at data and potentially looking, say, if it was 6 months ago that you did it, but that could have been at a different stage in your block, or it could have been after a different race recovery, pre and post that as well. So it's obviously important to take into context of what's around that effort.
Yeah,
at that
how did I
period of
do
time.
that? What was happening there that got me to that point, and why is it not now?
Yeah.
Or why is it better now? What's
What's working
there?
well, to be able to take that into your plan again, to build upon that as well. Definitely. So I think being aware of things that are triggered injury is obviously part of that process.
It's a big one.
Yeah, and knowing sometimes that can be for different events. So knowing that an event has a lot of single track or stairs, and take into consideration that you can't always just jump straight back into stair set repeats. So it takes time for the body, obviously, to adapt to what you're doing, which, as for a cycle, and you come into, say, to UTA, if you start that in February, that first week is, you got to be careful as you start to build that type of adaptation to different types of training styles that are out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to focusing on those little weaknesses. It's always good to have external eyes on it where you can, but sometimes it's not feasible, But yeah, do I need to strengthen glutes? Do I need to pull back? Like recently, I sort of had a bit of a calf issue that just came out of nowhere. So okay, I need to pull back on doing that speed work. In the past, I've had Achilles issues.
Would you adapt your training block then? Like obviously in the short term, you're adapting it. But I'm sort of interested more in the case that, okay, I've done that for the next 3 weeks. I've looked at my plan. I've made my adaptation for the next 3 weeks because I know I'm not going to be able to hit potentially those targets. You still may have 6 weeks to go or 4 weeks to go in that training. Would you then go make an adjustment to the next block as well, or would you just try to blend into?
So after that event training block, or for the next sort of 3 week?
Yeah, the next. So if I'm 9 weeks out and I injure myself today,
yep.
I know the next 3 weeks I'm not going to be able to run hard because my calf is obviously not prime. 3 weeks go by. I'm starting to look. I'm looking at that week 4 component. Would you still execute that week 4 the same way that it was written down on the plan, or would you take into consideration? Sometimes it's like I'm okay, and you continue. And there's 2 ways here. It's either dropping volume in that process, or sometimes going, I need to work out how to rebuild that mileage. I've got enough time.
And that's it. I think it depends where you're at. If you get to a point and you're 4 weeks out, or maybe longer than that, five weeks out.
Oh, before taper, that's what I was sort of referring to. You've still got one more block to go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Like if you've got the space to make the adjustments, then absolutely. If it gets sort of super close to critical, that peak mileage sort of stuff, then it becomes really hard, because I know that for my comfortability level, I want, like I talked about with the marathon stuff, back at Savvy, I remember one specific time that one of the runners went out and come back, and like it was the longest run and only got about 20 Ks, I think, something like that. And you're just like, dude, you gotta go back out. You need 30 Ks.
Yeah,
otherwise
you
you're
need to
not
get
gonna
them in your
make it,
legs.
Yeah. So if I'm like at a point where I need to get that, then it's sort of critical that I try and get myself to that position to be able to execute that week or 2 weeks exactly as planned or as close to possible.
It's hard to navigate, and I think everyone has their different experiences in that space. And I suppose that's reading the body and reading current status of the body, knowing how your body has responded previously to those types, and that's fine if you've got the experience of doing that. And then the other one sort of being, well, sort of knowing maybe what you can get away with based upon how many weeks are left. And I suppose it's okay when you've got a bit of experience in that sort of space of what has and what hasn't worked, but if it was the first or second time, you just got to ride a decision.
And it's experience. Like
at the end of the day,
you get to know what your body does, and
but you learn that from that first 1 or 2 times of whether it's right or wrong. So I was probably highlighting is it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what choice is made. You're going to be disappointed when you can't do that race event or it wasn't as successful. But whatever that is a learning towards the next time, and just making sure the mental notes are there about what choices I made, so that you can reflect upon that next time around.
And if I've got the luxury of time, absolutely. I'd certainly going into, I think it was it Fuji? Anyway, one of the big events, I decided I'd try and do the Kira loop as hard and fast as I could. Came down, twisted my ankle. It was a mess, and I was 3 weeks off legs. Which was still relatively early in the phase, but still critical. This is going to do me a mischief. But so slowly building in that, okay, well, just getting out, getting the body moving, do the rest. Make sure you're rested and to a point. But then once you can move, I'd start the hiking and stuff and get back to the original plan as quickly as possible. But certainly there's some weeks where if you do your 3 week rest or whatever's recommended, and then not coming straight back in and going, cool, well, this week I was supposed to do a long run of 30 Ks and some hard 2K intervals, like 4 sets of 2K intervals.
You normally review that obviously with your physio or your recovery mechanism, or if you're just putting your feet up, obviously the advice from that would normally come with someone that you're working with. So I've obviously got some examples of that in this year. So I suppose if we start to look at say the last 12 months or so worth of style of training, we've had years of training and doing many things. The last 12 months, you've obviously had events that you've done. If you just look around that period of time, has your training been different to the period prior?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So I think my previous 12 months was probably worse than the previous block. So I guess my last big event was Fuji. And I don't think I executed that as well as I could have. Certainly in the taper period, I just kind of ruined it. But the event prior to that, nailed it. I was really happy with how that went, and the interesting point there is, I think the previous event I was running 7 days a week, and then Fuji I had like days off. Like I made sure I had a rest day pretty much every week.
And that's totally different to what training could have been years.
Oh, absolutely. And then previous to that, again, I was doing a lot of double run days and really targeting high volume, aiming for a lot of sort of 100-mile weeks. So
huge,
my training, like really a big experimenter. So I changed a lot. and based on that, like what's happened this past year, when I'm sort of at the moment on a downtime, but looking to next year, my view is probably go back to doing
which one?
More,
That's right.
Like high volume.
Would you test some of that prior? Is there a way of going, look, there's a way of testing some of that style, or?
Oh, absolutely. So I think chunking it back down into smaller blocks is certainly a way to do that. So recently I did sort of shorter 6 week, I think it might have been 8 week actually, an 8 week program just targeted at speed. So like shorter volume weeks or lower volume weeks, but lots of speed work, and which was really tough. And so, I don't think I executed it super well, but I did increase my speed. And now I'm on a bit of a downtime again, and so I think in about a month or so, I'm going to do exactly that and go back into, okay, let's play around with some sort of high volume stuff again, or maybe not. That's the wrong way.
High frequency.
That's
so allow the high volume to be built up from that consistent 6-7 days worth of style running, instead of jumping deep into the volume and then not realizing I probably could have been doing 5Ks a day.
Absolutely.
To then allow the frequency, to build up into volume.
Because that's it. Right now, at the moment, there'll be days weeks where I'll have 2 rest days, instead of the one, because I'm just sort of just taking it easy and just playing around at the moment. But certainly, I'm not going to jump in and go, cool, I'm going to do 7 days a week and double run days.
Because I've done it before.
2 or 3 of those.
Learning how to ramp into that and give it a bit of a tease.
And doing 10Ks minimum for each run. It'll be sort of coming back and going, okay, cool, maybe I'll do sort of make sure I'm 5Ks a day if I'm going to go over seven days, or if I'm going to do double run days, I'll do 5 in the morning, 5 in the arvo, or even 3 and 3, or just something. I'd struggle getting out for 3Ks, but you know what I mean.
Especially if it's raining. It's raining pretty hard at the moment. Which makes it hard too for training. So
definitely.
So I think my last 12 months has been probably one of my hardest 12 months of training. And what I mean by hard, not hard training, as the hardest to deal with. It's nearly been 12 months exactly from UTMB Triple C. And as much as the event went okay, the post recovery of that, with both Achilles being shot, really struggled with walking post any form of running and trail running, to the point that elevation was really hard to build, and every time started to try back into problems again, so that would have been, we're in about, say, September. Had the miler for Cosy planned in December. Trained somehow for that, and that probably exposed where my both Achilles were at that period of time. Got to the race, DNF'd at 30 due to a hamstring, so it wasn't even the Achilles. I was probably fortunate that it didn't happen, because I would have pushed myself through the event to then have issues afterwards. Then tried again, so UTA was then May, so now I've got recover in December. Achilles felt okay for a week or two, and then started to build some elevation in January. and back to the same situation again, which ended up with cortisone injections in both of them, trying to build for UTA. And that's all not done outside of guidance. My changes that, as I said, I had coaches previously and changed into a coach to Alex in the last nearly 3 years now, and he's a physio and coach. So for me, that works really well because someone can sort of read where my body's at, sort of adjust my volume and what I'm tackling to give me a bit of guidance of you need to pull it back a little bit. So that gives me probably a reaction to how do I tackle this moving forward in January, February, and the cortisone was enough to get me going for a few weeks, but definitely it was a struggle, and I just got to my highest build of that 6 weeks out of UTA, and then rolled my ankle on Sublime, and I thought, one of the worst ones that I've done, and that was 3 weeks of trying to come back to running. So as we talked about earlier, how do you adapt? And it was just, for me, I was able to take a step back and just put it in the hands of Alex to deal with both the recovery of the ankle, which actually was a lot better a week later than probably what we anticipated, being fortunate over. But it did take 3 weeks to get to the point of being able to run. And now you're 3 weeks out from the event. And do you taper? Do you load up into the event, which I've had to do previously many times, of running into the event rather than a taper? But again, that's left into a coach's hands and a physio's hand to deal with how the body's reacting and probably what's needed for that race.
And that's shifting goals too, right? So, you come in and you might have a time goal or a distance or whatever that is, and these little setbacks happen, so it's a bit of a refocus. And you've last year and this year had some pretty lofty goals realistically, super significant. So I guess how has that training focus shifted, the goals focus shifted, and the conversations that happen with Alex around this is what I'm targeting. What do you think, or how do we manage that? What's the do you do a bit of a long-term planning? Here's the year planning with him, or
so we do highlight what are the races during the year. What's my say prime, rather than sort of saying a race, like what's the race that really is what I want to achieve something big in. I suppose some of that is, and I'm using those words rather than saying it's a PB or it's a time, because a lot of these things are about, it could be how far you're pushing yourself in an endurance or going long in a backyard. Sometimes it will be I want to do really well at that event. So UTMB was like just being a great run, getting through it, that had to deal with the elevation and everything that goes with those types of races. A backyard is what's your goal, in that, and then UTA always has to be a decision on is it just to complete or to be a good time in the mindset, or are you really chasing a silver buckle in doing that? I was very, very upfront about the intent to chase silver buckle this year, and trained as much as I was dealing with all those injuries, training like I was trying to get that. And I actually was probably in my best peak situation, regardless of the Achilles, the day before rolling my ankle. I remember posting about how good that volume train was, and then rolled, and then it, as you were sort of about to highlight for me, or intro, is I had to flip completely my mindset upside down about, now am I even going to be able to do this race? Because 6 weeks out changes everything, and that's hard. Obviously, anyone with injuries mentally trying to deal with that when you've highlighted yourself up into that race. So it then became just really dealing with getting moving again, and can I get to this race to be able to line up to run? Luckily, the 3 weeks went well, and then it was, can I move? Yep. Okay, I can run. I'm still in a situation that I had to make a choice of going hard or am I just there to be a participant? And my choice was I'm here to race and to chase the time. And that was, again, just getting your mental mindset, in that. There's nothing I could do in 3 weeks to improve my capability for speed or performance. It was about getting to the line in a state that I could actually be mobile and run. Race went, not a problem, no problems with Achilles. Other major issues, unexpected, but from the ability to run during the race and ankle perspective, it wasn't a problem and able to push for hard for time. Out of the race, recovery was fine. Didn't have too many issues with the Achilles for the first couple of weeks, and then they were back again. So that was the outcome in probably end of May. But I knew training block wise, sort of saying, looking at the year and what the goals were, that I knew I could push and try to, I'm not going to say to sacrifice the legs a little bit, because I knew I had a bit of time for my next event, and the backyard doesn't have vert. So I knew running at Reds that the course, the grass, and the cross country style sort of suited recovery mode quite well. And for the first time, I wasn't going to Gold Coast to do a marathon 6 weeks later. So the whole focus was over going very big at the backyard. So I knew I just had to get to the situation to be able to run and be mobile was probably the key word. Recover, be able to walk afterwards properly, and then get back into running again. But that's been a juggle. As much as it's there, it's still been a juggle to now to still do that. But that's all guided through having a coach to do that. So what else is in that space right now? Like training wise, Reds has come and been delayed, and that again, like compounding.
That's another piece, right?
Yeah.
You're training, you're peaking. Like you usually, well, like I think most people who have a bit of a concept about training, and even on that 3 week sort of, or whatever your rotation is, 3 week peak drop, leads to a peak. You aim for a peak, which is X amount out from an event, to get to that, and then, as we know, with their outdoor events, anything can happen. COVID, rain, whatever.
Trails being closed, same as UTA, multiple years.
Absolutely, like anything can happen. So when you get you get that peak, and usually they're cancelled not prior to your peak, it's around about your peak or after your peak. How do you pivot?
From that
to then get there.
It's always difficult. I think there's a mental challenge initially, because you're dealing with obviously just an emotional component initially. Being able to then put that to the side. So Reds is a perfect example. I've probably been in my best endurance, mindset, body, everything ready for that race a couple of weeks out, and then obviously it was postponed. So what I emotionally felt was I was good the week that it happened, as in the delay. Didn't have a time, then knew the time. Okay, not a problem. Mentally knew the new date of when that race was. I still needed to run because you've tapered. Now I need to be sort of starting to build back up from that again. So it was just about get out there and go for a run, take the bit of pressure off volume or expectations, but just get moving, because that's sort of the body needs to understand that I'm actually going back. I'm not racing, I'm going back into building blocks. Then obviously mentally the brain's got to tick into that same mindset. But I found that the third week was really the lull, because of how far the race was away. So it was 12 weeks at that point, a little bit less with a couple of weeks into it, that was where, wait a second, I've got another 2 more months of building and I've just peaked, and how am I going to sustain this, plus pressures of other races, but just let alone going, I've built all this volume for a couple months, and how do I sustain this moving forward? And there was a week of a few chats around with obviously your friend group and Alex as a coach about, like, that was the week that I really sort of struggled. But then the week after that, I'm locked at, okay, it's 7 weeks. I need to get back out and start building again of what I'm doing, and then autopilot for me sort of just kicks in, and okay, building block, and I normally sometimes use the Strava, I'll use the guidance to go back to that and have a look at the graph and go, okay, what am I going to use for the next 2 months as my block? And I look at it and go, okay, I'm just going to build 10%. I'm going to use a different approach. Normally I don't do that. Sort of pick hours and things like that. I'm just looking at it, go, look, so I'm trying to get 10%, roughly around that sort of number, and just use the graph as a climb. So I deliberately use that as a tool just to try to get my mindset sharp to what I'm actually doing, accountability. I know I don't feel like running. We've had 4 weeks worth of rain, and somehow just got to get out there and get it done, and just use the graph as being my accountability to get that to execute for that event that's coming up shortly.
And programming wise, are you mostly programming those runs, or is it more your coach is saying, right, you need to run this distance, like let's
we haven't
working on that 10%, or are you sort of...
I have the 10%
Yep.
mindset of where I am with the graph. Alex gives me the accountability and guidance of what's the plan, what am I looking to do. He'll sort of have a message with me of, okay, we know our days that we're running, we know roughly where our limits are. On, let's say, the long run, for example, will be a bit of an open conversation of, well, like, what are you planning? Oh, that's a little bit too much. Like, let's, do some more on Sunday versus Saturday. I get the continual reminders, like same as the midweek runs, are like just they're there to create the foundation for your long run as well. Not try to go out and run every 2 runs during the week, like 20 and 20. That's going to take away from the long run on the weekend. So we do have a bit of a chat about just reading during the week, and we'll normally have a message on Friday about what the plan is for the weekend, and I'll get an approval, yes or no, or if I just want to do a little bit more. It's like keep within the margins of what we're trying to do, and then that gets adapted to how the body's feeling, and then whether or not we build upon that again.
Which is a little bit of a different method to what I think most people would understand of a run-specific coach, right? Yours sounds like it's more of a dialogue, where, like I remember recently, you sort of were, okay, I'm going out to do marathon distance on the course.
Yes.
And so he hasn't, and because we all know, like at the end of the day, a marathon's pretty arbitrary distance, right? But he hasn't sort of said, you need to do marathon distance on this day.
Yeah.
It's something you went, I'm going to set that goal in my head. And
I know the week before was, say, 30, 33. I knew the next stretch to that is 40 on the loop. I was like, oh, well, Sydney Marathon's on Sunday. Today's Saturday. It'd be nice to do 42 on Saturday. It's 2 more Ks. It is what it is.
And you say, how about it? And he says, oh, yeah, okay, we can do that.
Yeah, and it'll always be the reminder of just reading the body and how are you going and effort. And then even within that I will challenge myself within the run. So whether it's a quicker segment or taking less breaks. So I've got enough, I suppose, experience of my own adaptation to be able to make that freedom of choice sort of within that. And then, it will get to this week, that it just went past. And it's like, it's the next step up to that. And it all depends on how the body's recovering to the week prior. And the variable will then sort of be the Sunday. So if I, whatever those recovery, but I've been very known to, go do a triple or something that's sublime, on my Sunday has been my recovery endurance sort of day, to just to push the load, and no different to now. So I'd go do my backup on my Sunday, but back in 10 years ago, it would only be 3 runs. But in the last 5 years, my Sunday would be that extra little bit of, I suppose it's for myself, and I know you've got to fit your stair sets in or your extra little bit of time available, outside family time, as that was my little extra little in the back of my mind, feeling like I've done the work that's needed to turn up at the start line for that race that's been out there. So
you've got the backyard coming up. After that, you've got the miler. And that sort of sees us through roughly to the end of the year.
Yeah.
Possibly. What does training look like after the miler? Because that's November, I think.
It's about 4 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
After.
What does training look like after that? And have you plotted out next year so you sort of know roughly what training looks like?
How far do we look out? So definitely the miler is planned. Post miler is a gap. So from my perspective, I'll have the event, and then I'll have something earmarked for my perspective New Year's Eve. We've got a couple of traditions that are going in that sort of space. Sublime's closed, so that one, which we'll talk about later, I'm not sure what will happen, but something will happen. But there's no race planned. Then I'll be like, what's coming for next year? So definitely UTA 100, it could have been the miler sort of component, but right now in 2 weeks tickets open. The 100 will be the chasing silver goal. Around February, I'm planning to take my eldest daughter, who doesn't actively run at the moment, to go do a trail run up at probably cracking back up towards that way, Threadbow. That's the plan, just to get out and do something between everything else. No major race events. I've sort of gone from being one every month or so down to like picking, these are the ones that I really want to, they're the prime events, and if something comes up between it, so be it, but they're the ones now sort of really trying to focus in to execute. So the training COSI will come off, and then it'll be like, just what's coming, just get the legs turning again, and then look at the plan of what the ramp, as you work backwards, what the ramp needs to be successful at UTA in May.
Amazing.
What about yourself? If we've got now, how many months to the end of the year? There's no race.
Nothing scheduled. Discussions taking place about what that end of the year looks like. Yeah. So about to go on a little bit of a break. Yeah. Then I'm going to come back and probably start playing around with some of that training, so doing a little bit of experimenting. Yeah. I was half thinking about doing another speed block, and then start sort of building some volume. I've got it pretty firmly in my mind about what I want to do for part of next year. Yeah. So I haven't pulled the trigger yet because there's a couple little financial things that are going on. But looking at Swiss Alps miler, Swiss Alps 100 next year, which is at the end of next year. So it's in that late August, I believe. Yeah. And so I was just aiming at that, and then I sort of realised, well, that's an awful long time between drinks, right? So some people were pushing me to go down to Buffalo, and also to Kanani in Tassie, which I thought would be amazing. Really like that long distance sort of stuff. Yes, the big thing with Kanani, they've got a downhill event, and I thought that, I've always thought it'd be amazing to go do one of those fast downhill events. But yeah, I haven't sold, but I kind of feel like I want to do something in the early part of the year. I just haven't really nailed what that looks like, but with the view that the majority of my training is looking at that Swiss Alps. Now, the significant part about that is that event has over 10,000 metres of ascent, of elevation, and that's more than I've ever done. Yeah,
again, on top of,
Yeah, and I've this past year, or the last miler I did, I sort of really came to the realisation that maybe the miler isn't my event, or it's not where I'm strong, it's not where I'm terribly good, but that's not to say I'm not going to do it. I'm still targeting those milers because, But
that's the challenge. That's the challenge. Like we'll sort of say that there's that item sitting there, and
So I really conquer that this next year, aiming for that, that's a tough goal. Yep. That's 100 miles. That's 10,000 meters. So really setting up my year to look at what that elevation looks like and how am I going to nail this event in the best way I can. Let's try like the most recent event was probably not my best version of myself. So maybe trying to make a little bit of a comeback to what the best version of me now is.
Yeah, and what is it? Yeah, also what that is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going, like, considering and thinking about what are those weaknesses, what are those things that I'm going to have to do to get there and really
to build upon that.
Do that the best I can. And there'll still be tears, there'll be pain, there'll be all that stuff.
Always. It's part of the venture.
100%. But let's aim to really look at that training plan and how do I best do that. And one of the biggest things I think is going back to doing some like really structured strength training.
Yeah, so that it's all set in the diary, ready to execute, rinse, repeat through that process.
Yeah, and it's a non-negotiable.
Yes.
So talking, like, I think this conversation's been really good for that, because thinking about those early days, those foundational days where you have the class and you turn up at 6 o'clock and you do it, because if you don't do it, when are you going to do it? So you just set those times. Or whatever it might be, that means you get there. And if you don't have that accountability of having a community or a paid class or whatever that is, how do you set that and make sure you get there? So I'll be really looking at that for this next next
awesome.
block.
Nice little challenge for 2026.
100%.
Get it going. Well, let's wrap it up.
Amazing. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Endless Trails. We're enjoying the journey so far, but throw in a comment. I know you can comment in Spotify. Hopefully you're following us on Instagram, maybe on YouTube. Throw us a comment and maybe tell us a little bit about how you set your training plan. Are you coached? Do you do it yourself? Are you a Mick or are you a Josh? And we'll see you next time on Endless Trails.